She was just a mother, left with nothing but a small, fragile child and a past that had no name, no home, and no hope. Every door she knocked on was closed. Every hand she reached for turned away. She thought life had forgotten her. Until a rugged cowboy appeared on the horizon. Carrying more than a horse and a gun, he carried the possibility of a new life, a last name, and a love she never dared to dream of. Would she trust him? Could she dare to hope again? Or was she destined to remain invisible, wandering a world that had abandoned her? Stay with me, because this is the story of how a lost mother and her daughter found not just a name, but a family, and how love arrived when she least expected it. The dust swirled around Clara's worn-out boots, a constant companion in this desolate landscape. Each gust of wind felt like a whisper of mockery, a reminder of how utterly alone she was. Holding her daughter, Rosie, a little tighter, she looked out at the endless horizon. Hope was a currency she could no longer afford. They had been on the road for weeks, sleeping in barns when they were lucky, under the stars when they were not. Every town was the same. A flash of pity in someone's eyes, quickly followed by a shake of the head and a door closing softly, but firmly, in her face. Clara was a ghost, a woman without a past she could speak of and a future she couldn't imagine. The father of her child was a memory she fought to suppress, a shadow that had promised her the world and left her with nothing but a broken heart and a baby to care for. She had no family to turn to, no name that carried any weight. She was simply Clara, and this was Rosie. That was all the world needed to know to dismiss them. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent, casting long, lonely shadows across the plains, Rosie began to cough. It was a dry, rasping sound that tore through Clara's soul. The child's face was flushed, her small body trembling with fever. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Clara. They had no medicine, no shelter from the coming night's chill. For the first time, true despair began to settle in her bones. She sank to her knees, the dust of the road caking her dress, and held Rosie close, whispering promises of warmth and safety that she had no way of keeping. She was failing. She was failing her daughter. It was in that moment of utter hopelessness that she heard it. The steady, rhythmic sound of hoofbeats approaching. She looked up, shielding her eyes against the setting sun. A figure on horseback emerged from the shimmering heat haze, growing larger and more defined with each passing second. He was a cowboy, tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low. As he drew closer, she saw the weathered lines on his face, the kindness in his eyes that seemed out of place in this harsh land. He reined in his horse a few feet away, his gaze falling on the small, shivering bundle in her arms. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "You and the little one look like you could use some help." Clara clutched Rosie tighter, her first instinct a surge of mistrust. Help from a stranger was a risk she'd learned to be wary of. Men had offered help before, always with a price she wasn't willing to pay. But then she looked at Rosie's pale face, felt the heat radiating from her tiny body, and knew she had no choice. This man, this stranger, might be their only chance. My daughter. "She's sick," Clara managed to say, her voice cracking. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion. He knelt beside them, his presence surprisingly calming. He gently placed a calloused hand on Rosie's forehead. "She's burning up," he said, his expression serious. "My name is Jed. My ranch is just over that ridge. I have a warm bed, food, and my sister knows a thing or two about fevers. Please, let me take you there." He wasn't looking at her with pity or desire, but with genuine concern. It was a look she hadn't seen in so long, she had almost forgotten it existed. Swallowing her fear, she nodded. Jed carefully lifted Rosie from her arms, handling the child with a surprising tenderness. He then helped Clara to her feet and onto his horse, placing Rosie securely in her lap before swinging up behind her. As they rode towards the ridge, with the warmth of his body a steady presence at her back, a tiny, fragile spark of something she hadn't felt in years flickered to life. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close. Yet's ranch was not a grand estate, but a modest, sturdy homestead that radiated warmth and life. A woman with a kind, round face and eyes as gentle as Yet's rushed out to meet them. This was Sarah, his sister. Without a word, she took Rosie from Clara's arms and carried her inside, clucking with concern like a mother hen. Over the next few days, Sarah nursed Rosie back to health with herbal remedies and cool cloths, while Jed made sure Clara had food to eat and a quiet place to rest. For the first time since Rosie was born, Clara felt the crushing weight on her shoulders begin to lift. She watched Jed as he worked around the ranch. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He mended fences with quiet efficiency, spoke to his animals with a soft voice, and treated his sister with a deep, abiding respect. He never asked about her past, never pressed her for details. He simply accepted her presence, offering her a safe haven without expectation. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the stars blanket the sky, Jed came and sat in the rocker next to her. For a long while they sat in a comfortable silence, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the gentle creak of the chairs. "You don't have to tell me your story," he said finally, his voice soft. "But you should know you have a place here, for as long as you need it." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. She had been invisible for so long, a nameless, faceless wanderer. But here, under the vast western sky, this quiet, rugged man saw her. He truly saw her. She found herself telling him everything. The broken promises, the lonely journey, the constant fear. He listened without judgment, his steady gaze never leaving her face. When she finished, her voice choked with emotion. He simply reached over and took her hand. His grip was firm and reassuring. "Clara," he said, speaking her name as if it were something precious. "A name is just a word. It's the person who makes it mean something. And you are one of the strongest people I have ever met." In the weeks that followed, the ranch truly became their home. Rosie, now healthy and vibrant, followed Jed everywhere, her laughter echoing across the yard. She called him Jeddy, and he would swing her up onto his shoulders, his own deep laugh booming in response. Clara found her own rhythm, helping Sarah in the house and garden, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't known was possible. Her feelings for Jed grew steadily, quietly, like the wildflowers blooming on the prairie. It wasn't a sudden, passionate flame, but a slow-burning ember of deep affection and profound gratitude. She saw the way he looked at her, a gentle warmth in his eyes that went beyond simple kindness. One evening, he took her for a walk to the top of the ridge overlooking the valley. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. "Clara," he began, turning to face her, "I know I don't have much to offer. Just this land, this small house, but it's a good life. A peaceful one. And it would be a whole lot better with you and Rosie in it, permanently." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to stay, to let me give you my name. To be my wife." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. A home, a family, a name. Everything she had ever wanted, everything she had given up on, was being offered to her by this good, honorable man. She looked into his eyes and saw her future. A future not of wandering and despair, but of love, stability, and belonging. "Yes," she whispered, the word a release of all her past pain. "Yes, Jed, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms, and as he kissed her, Clara knew she had finally found her way home. She was no longer a nameless ghost. She was Clara, a mother, a survivor. And soon, she would be Clara Miller, a wife, a partner, and a part of a family, rooted in the rich soil of the land and the even richer soil of a cowboy's love. The world had not abandoned her after all. It had simply been waiting for the right man to lead her home. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of love and redemption. We'll see you in the next video. The wind howled across the barren plains, carrying with it the smell of dry earth and forgotten dreams. Lila clutched her daughter, Emily, tightly, rocking her in rhythm with the gusts. The small girl stirred, her tiny face scrunching as if she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her mother. Lila whispered softly, though the words seemed to vanish in the wind. "She, my love, Mama's here." Mama's not going anywhere. But the truth lingered heavy on her shoulders, a burden as constant as the open sky. Not long ago, Lila had been someone, at least that's what she told herself. She had a name, a family, a home. But those had all been ripped away in a single devastating night of betrayal and loss. She had watched the man she loved turn into a stranger, a ghost who walked out without a word, taking with him every hope she had so carefully nurtured. In that moment, Lila felt smaller than she had ever felt before, less than a shadow, a whisper in the wind. She was just a mother with a child and nothing else. Days blurred into nights, and nights bled into an endless, agonizing loop of worry and hunger. Her world had shrunk to the basic primal needs of survival. She scavenged what little she could find, A crust of bread offered by a passing traveler. A worn blanket someone had discarded. A few precious moments of rest while Emily slept peacefully in her arms. The world seemed to move on around them, oblivious to their plight. Every time she closed her eyes, she was haunted by the image of a world where they had been left behind, a world where she and her daughter were simply invisible to everyone. But Lila's spirit, though battered and bruised, refused to break completely. She had Emily, and that was reason enough to keep moving, to put one foot in front of the other even when her body screamed in protest. She told herself over and over again, a mantra against the despair. One day, we'll find a life worth living. One day, someone will see us. It was a desperate prayer, a promise whispered to the dust. It was during one of these aimless wanderings at the dusty edge of a small, quiet town that she first saw him. A man on horseback, his hat tilted low against the sun, his eyes sharp yet not unkind. He was a cowboy, the kind she had only seen in stories, strong, fearless, and emanating a strange, solid comfort. He noticed her almost immediately, as if he had been looking for her all along, as if she wasn't invisible after all. His gaze wasn't one of pity but of recognition. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that made her want to drop to her knees and confess every fear she had buried deep inside her heart. The sound of his voice was like a cool drink of water after days of thirst. Lila shook her head, unsure why she even tried to answer. The lie was automatic, a reflex born of pride and survival. I'm fine," she murmured, though her exhausted eyes betrayed the truth. Her voice was barely a rasp, a sound she hardly recognized as her own. The cowboy dismounted with a fluid grace, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. He knelt beside her, not too close, not too distant, respecting the invisible barrier of pride she carried like a suit of armor. He looked from her tired face to the small child nestled in her arms. "You don't look fine," he said simply, his words cutting through her pretense. "And that little one, she deserves better than the wind and dust for a home." Lila blinked, a lump forming in her throat. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her, not really seen her, for what she was, a mother, desperate and afraid, but fiercely determined to protect her child. He didn't just see a vagrant. He saw a mother fighting a losing battle. "My name's Cole," he said, offering his hand. It wasn't just a gesture to shake hers, but something more, a promise, a lifeline. "And I reckon maybe I can help you. Maybe you and your daughter don't have to wander alone anymore." Something in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. A feeling she thought had died long ago. Something in his solid presence whispered hope into the hollow, empty spaces of her soul. Lila wanted to trust him. Oh, how she desperately wanted to believe him. But trusting meant opening herself up to the possibility of more loss. And loss, well, she wasn't sure she had the strength to endure it again. To hope was to risk having that hope shattered once more. And yet deep down, a tiny, defiant flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps, just perhaps, this stranger, this cowboy, could be the answer to a life she had almost given up on. Perhaps he could give them something more than food, more than shelter, a chance at belonging, at family, at love. As Cole stood and tipped his hat, motioning for her to follow him toward the town, Lila tightened her hold on Emily. She whispered a quiet promise, not to the wind this time, but to her daughter and to herself, a promise she hoped with every fiber of her being she could keep. Maybe this is our chance. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lila allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the shadows of yesterday. A life where she and her daughter could finally have a name, a home, and a future. With a deep, shaky breath, she rose to her feet and took the first step toward him, a first step toward a new beginning. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of hope and resilience. The road to Cole's ranch was long, and every single mile tested Lila's courage. She walked beside his horse at first, refusing to ride. She was afraid that accepting even that small kindness might make her weak, might make her owe him something. Cole didn't push her. He simply slowed his horse to a walk, matching her pace, as if he understood that real healing didn't come from being carried, it came from being respected. Emily, exhausted from the long journey, eventually fell asleep against Lila's chest, her small body a warm weight of trust. Cole noticed. Without a word, he dismounted, taking off his heavy coat. "It'll get cold after sunset," he said, his voice low and steady. He draped it gently around the sleeping child, careful not to touch Lila. That one act, so careful, so deeply human, did something inside her. It cracked open a door she had kept locked and barred for far too long. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Lila braced herself for what she expected would come next. Judgment, questions, suspicion, or maybe even outright rejection. But what she found was quiet. Just wide-open land stretching out under a vast sky. A small, sturdy house that smelled of wood smoke and coffee. It wasn't grand or impressive, but it was safe. And safety, she realized with a jolt, was something she hadn't truly felt in years. The days that followed were not easy. Layla insisted on working from dawn till dusk, cleaning, cooking, mending fences, anything she could do to prove she wasn't a burden, to earn her keep. Cole watched her, a silent presence. Sometimes he'd offer a helping hand, and other times he'd step back, giving her the space she so desperately needed. He seemed to understand her fierce, fragile pride. But the nearby town did not share his kindness. Whispers followed her like a shadow whenever she had to go for supplies. No husband, no last name. That child who's the father? Every word was a tiny, sharp blade, reopening wounds she was trying so hard to close. One afternoon, after a shopkeeper flat out refused to serve her, Lila returned to the ranch with trembling hands and tears she refused to let fall. Cole saw it the moment he looked at her face. "Someone say something to you?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. She just shook her head, but her silence screamed louder than any words could. That night she finally broke. Sitting on the porch staring out into the endless consuming dark, Lila confessed everything, the abandonment that had shattered her world, the betrayal that had stolen her name, the gnawing fear of raising her daughter in a world that judged before it ever tried to listen. "I don't even have a name anymore," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm just someone who was left behind." Cole said nothing at first. He just sat beside her, staring out into the same night, his jaw tight, his eyes thoughtful. Then he turned to her and spoke, his voice soft but with a strength that made her look up. "No," he said, "you're a mother. And that's the strongest thing a person can be." Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The rhythm of the ranch became their own. Emily's laughter, once a rare and precious sound, now echoed freely across the fields. Lila started sleeping through the night, the nightmares finally beginning to recede. The ranch began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like home. And then one morning the past came knocking. A man arrived on horseback, unkempt, angry, with a demanding glint in his eye. Emily's father. He claimed rights. He claimed ownership. He claimed Lila owed him something. Fear, cold and sharp, rushed through her like ice, paralyzing her. But before she could even find her voice, Cole stepped forward, placing himself between them. "You don't get to claim what you abandoned," Cole said, his voice dangerously low, colder than a winter wind. The confrontation was tense, a spark away from exploding into violence. But Cole stood his ground, a solid, unmovable force protecting not just Lila and Emily, but the future they were so carefully trying to build. Defeated by Cole's unwavering resolve, the man eventually turned his horse and left, leaving behind only silence and a new, profound clarity. That night, after Emily was asleep, Cole made a choice. He stood before Lila on the porch, nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I can't erase your past," he began, his voice a little unsteady, "but I can offer you a future. Not out of pity. Not out of obligation. But because I choose you. Both of you." Lila's breath caught in her throat. He continued, his gaze locked on hers. "My last name, it's yours, if you want it. If you want a life where you're never invisible again." Tears streamed down her face. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of finally being seen. Of finally being chosen, not just needed. She didn't answer right away. She just pulled Emily, who had woken and come to her side, closer, feeling her daughter's steady heartbeat against her own. And in that quiet moment, a powerful truth settled in her heart. She hadn't been saved by him. She had survived on her own. And now, she was ready to build something new, together. When Lila finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "Yes," she said, "but not because I need saving. Because I believe in us." The wedding was small, simple, honest. Just the 3 of them under the wide-open sky. But when Lila spoke her new name aloud for the very first time, it felt like reclaiming a part of herself she thought was lost forever. She was no longer the woman without a name. No longer the mother left behind. She was a wife. She was a protector. She was home. And as Emily ran across the sun-drenched fields, her laughter carried on the wind, free and joyous, Lila understood the truth she would carry for the rest of her life. Sometimes life doesn't give you a second chance. Sometimes it gives you something even better, a new name, a new beginning, and the courage to believe again. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. See you next time.